Hello and welcome. My name is Carl Murawski, and on this channel, typically what I'll talk about is products that will last you a long time. A lot of workwear, boots, stuff like that. But this video is gonna be a little bit different, and I really wanted to, matter of fact, I had a whole other video planned for this week, but I thought that this was so important to talk about that got pushed off, and I decided to speak about this instead. Because I see a really big problem out there. I was listening to a podcast recently from somebody who I really enjoy, and they were talking about the trades and promoting the trades. Now, what seems to have happened, or is happening right now, is there's a shift. So you get a lot of people who are going, you know what? Working in the trades or working blue collar jobs doesn't have the stigma that it used to, and you can make a lot more money, and you get paid to learn the job, and you know, et cetera, on and on with all of the benefits. And I think this really began from the backlash against student loans. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with people promoting the trades. As a matter of fact, I think it's a good thing, but this is what I see. The people who do promote the trades typically never worked in them. What I think is really missing is some people are not telling you the downsides of working in the field. Now, a little bit of history about me, just so you know who I am. I didn't work for my dad's company. I started off as a mechanic in 1999. 1999 I started off, and I wasn't a mechanic. I was basically washing cars, sanding cars down, doing oil changes, doing tune-ups back when you could tune up a car. And I kept on doing that. I ended up operating a tow truck, getting my CDL Class A, doing heavy highway towing, repossessions, stuff like that. It was cool work, but it just didn't really pay as much as I wanted. And then one night I was very, very frustrated, and I drove directly to the trade school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I decided on the way there that I figured, well, I don't want to be deaf by the time I'm 30 by knocking on tin, so HVAC is out. I really don't want to deal with being wet all day, so being a plumber is out. Well, what's left? An electrician. Great. My grandfather was a lineman. I figured maybe it ran in the blood somewhere, so I started my apprenticeship. I started that in 2005 or 4, something like that. And I just began working. Now, back then, the residential boom was still in full effect before the bust of 2008. So I worked in residential for quite a while, and then I moved into commercial and industrial work. I've been doing that type of work for the last nearly 20 years. So just to say that, you know, I have moved from, and nobody knew who I was. I went all the way from an apprentice to the position that I hold now, and you know, all those things in between. So now I'm a licensed electrician, have run crews of men, have worked on jobs that have been, the biggest job I ever worked on, the electrical portion, was about $80 million. That was in some railroad work. So we've done a lot of different types of work. So I have seen quite a few things out there, and I just want to share with you some of my thoughts. Now let's start with the advantages of trades. Now, the first one that everybody will tell you is that you get paid to learn, that you don't have to take out a loan to go to school, which can be true. Depends on which route you take, where you are, the local that you may be in, if you even decide to go the union route. And so you can do that. Alternatively, if you go open shop, oftentimes you do have to actually pay at a tech school. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that rate is now. If I remember correctly, the schooling portion to be an electrician was somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. Now, if you go with a union, a lot of times that stuff is included in your dues. So yes, that can be true, but not always. So depending on where you are, how strong the union is, if you even want to go union or not, and that could be a whole separate video in itself, that may or may not be true. You still might need a student loan depending on how the place is that you're working. People will talk about the earning potential, which again depends on where you are. Yes, it can be fantastic. Here in New England, I live in Connecticut, we do a lot of work in New York. The wages are very high. And you can easily make 6 figures really without breaking a sweat. I mean, you'll sweat, but you know what I mean. And depending on which trade you get into, that can go really, really high. If you chase storms as a lineman, I know guys who are making $300,000 a year. Now, you're basically living a nomadic lifestyle, but yes, the earning potential can be there. I also know people who live in Florida who make a fraction of what we make up here. So that might be true depending on where you live, but it is not by any means a hard and fast rule the nation over or the world over, as far as I'm concerned. I can only really speak about the United States and the different states that I've heard of. There's the benefit of not having a sedentary job where you just sit at a desk all day, kind of typing away and having to worry about carpal tunnel and your neck and blue blocker glasses. Now that can be just fine, but a lot of people are more aware of needing to move around than ever before. So yes, there is the benefit of being able to move all day long, keeping active, and don't forget, you always have that tradesman grip. I remember going to the doctor this last year and I shook his hand. He goes, "Are you an electrician or a plumber?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "The only people who have grips like that are electricians and plumbers." Now, I would argue that there are plenty of other people in the trades who have grips like that, masons for sure, but that was one of the things that he said. So, it's like it does take care of your body because you're always moving around. That is a benefit. There is some job satisfaction, especially if you're going to do new construction. You look back, there wasn't a building there before, and now there is. Or if you're an electrician, you get to flip the switch and the room lights up. Or if you're a plumber, or if you're anything else, you can look back and see the results of your work. That's not always the case look at education, healthcare, where there's just a revolving door of people who need you. And maybe you don't really see the benefit of what you're actually doing. It's very, very easy to see in construction, especially, what you've done, and the job satisfaction goes along with it. One of the benefits that I don't really hear people mention is that usually there are no stupid bullshit policies which require you not to talk about certain things, harassment, whatever. That kind of thing does exist in larger companies, larger contractors. If you're working with a small shop, it's very much kind of the old school way, which frankly was a lot of fun. I gotta tell you, just being able to kind of bust stones without having to worry about somebody calling you to HR is a lot of fun. It's also the way you build camaraderie. And I remember when I was working as a mechanic, I was fresh out of high school, and I remember thinking, man, everybody's so mean to me. Why are they so mean? And a little guy named Jerry, little painter, the guy had to be 5'4", came over to me and he goes, "Hey, come here, kid, come here." He was always wearing these blue gloves. I don't know why. He was wearing blue gloves. "Come here, come here. Listen, if they're making fun of you, it's because they like you. If they're being quiet, that's when you have to worry." And then I realized, they're not being mean. This is how they show affection. This is how they joke around. This is how they build friendship. How screwed up is that? Well, after you get used to it, it's pretty regular. And I gotta tell you, there is a lot of fun. You can't do that stuff in an office. And the last one I'll mention is camaraderie. Like I said, when you start to get into a really good company with people who you enjoy, and you get some of that kind of, ball busting going on, and you have a really good relationship with the people you work with, sometimes they are literally in charge of your life. Especially if somebody's doing confined space stuff or working somewhere where basically you have to have a spotter, they can be the person who means life or death to you. And it does build camaraderie. There are a lot of guys who I worked with, back in my apprenticeship days, who I still speak to. They've worked at different companies. I've worked at different companies, and I still stay in touch with them. Now, I'm sure this does exist in other professions for sure, but in blue-collar work, a lot of times when you go through stuff that you have to go through, it brings you a lot closer. So there's a sense of camaraderie within your group and also within your trade. That's a really great thing. Now, here are some of the disadvantages that nobody seems to talk about. You hear about all the advantages that I just mentioned, but you don't really hear about the disadvantages. And some of these will be self-evident, so I get it. But the first one is that you're gonna have to work in the heat, the cold, a combination of the two, depending on where you live, and that might really shift your hours. So I know people who work in the south of the United States, their hours are typically very, very early so they can avoid the peak sunshine and heat. So that could be really tricky. Up here in New England, we have, the heat in the summertime, we have the cold in the wintertime, and you have to be able to dress for all of those different things, work in all those different conditions, drive to work in snow, in the sun, and the heat, all that stuff, and being able to operate within that 100-degree swing or so is not easy. Believe me when I tell you, in January, where it's gonna be 2 degrees out, the last thing you want to do is go out into a parking garage or someplace that's exposed to the elements where the wind is whipping through. It's very difficult to be productive, but you're going to be expected to work in those conditions no matter what they are. Most of these jobs don't have any running water. They don't have any operating toilets. Anybody who's had to use the blue room or a porta potty or whatever you call it on your job site will tell you how disgusting they can be. And imagine going into one of those on those very hot August days where it's just like you're in a sauna. It's terrible. I remember, literally, you gotta go take a number 2 and you're peeling your pants off of you. It's horrible, horrible. What I wouldn't give for a nice air-conditioned bathroom at that time. Then you reach over, guaranteed the toilet paper is gone because some son of a bitch decided that he was going to use all of it or steal the rolls. That happens sometimes. There's a lock on the toilet paper rolls. Sometimes, you know, they used to start putting these hand sanitizer things in there so you can have some sort of way to clean your hands. Somebody inevitably takes one of those things and just does this, and it all goes on the ground. Because people who work on construction sites can be animals. And these are the people you're gonna have to work with all day. One of the tricks that I've learned, though, is if you're lucky enough to have toilet paper in the blue house, all you do is you take a little bit of that, and if you have a freshly cleaned porta potty, which is a luxury, believe me, anybody will tell you that using one right after the honey wagon has come through and cleaned them all out is basically the closest that you're gonna get to a Swedish massage on the job. You throw a little bit of that wadded up toilet paper just to break the surface tension of that water that they put down there, because otherwise you get what they call Poseidon's kiss. Because when you let the bomb drop, a lot of times the splashback is serious, and I don't know what's in that water. I don't want to know what's in that water. That's a tip from somebody who's been doing it for a while to you new guys out there. A little bit of toilet paper really goes a long way. One of the things that I've done to kind of counteract this whole situation is I'll bring a bag with me. And I have something in my lunch bag. At worst case scenario, I have some hand wipes. I have a little bit of toilet paper in there. It's kind of the essentials that, look, if I don't have this, my day's gonna be real goddamn unpleasant. Speaking of amenities, I hope that you enjoy eating out of your car or truck. I can't tell you how many times I have eaten out of my van. And in a case like that, actually, the better seat is the passenger seat because you don't have that steering wheel sitting right there. Matter of fact, there's a whole art to warming up your food on the dashboard of your vehicle. Guys would bring in pizza and then they would lay out a thing of tin foil and then put their pizza there because the sun coming through, and it would actually work. It would work. So you could actually warm things up in there. Now, if you're not able to get back to your vehicle, a lot of these bigger jobs, you're really not gonna go walking back to the parking lot. You're gonna stay on the job. Well, you find a bucket or something to sit on. There usually aren't lunch tables. There's not a cafeteria. You're not taking some of your buddies and then running down to have a sit-down dinner, or a sit-down lunch rather, at the Subway. Typically not. So that's something they have to get used to. Oh, and God forbid you have to get something off the Roach Coach. The Roach Coach is basically those like sort of catering wagons that go around to the job sites. Some of them can be good because they're independently operated and you get some guys who really know what they're doing. But more often than not, One of the things that affected me especially was the constant travel. And in Connecticut, small state, like I said, we would work in New York quite a bit. The shortest commute I ever had was 10 minutes. The longest I ever had was about 2.5 hours. I was working in the Bronx. And anything in between there, I would say that 1 hour is the average. But ask somebody in Texas, a bigger state, how long their commute is. And the problem is that you're not going to an office somewhere. You can choose to live close to your office. You could take public transit, you could walk to your office if you want to, but with construction, you have to go where the job is. And again, blue collar work, it's varied, all right? So you could be working as a maintenance person. And so in that case, if you're working in a hospital, you could live close to the hospital. But for the guys who I'm working with, we have to go to the job. So I have gone to Monticello, New York. Right now working in New Haven. And we've worked everywhere in between there. So the travel can really get tricky, especially if you're working overtime. So now you have an 8-hour day. Maybe you have a 10-hour day. Then you got to tack an hour onto each end of that. You basically have time to shower, eat, and then repeat the whole thing over again. It can be pretty rough. And when you finally get to the site, these bigger sites make you park away from the job. And that could be really, it could suck. One time I was working at a hospital, they didn't want to see any construction workers or our low-life vehicles, so they made us park in the farthest lot away. Which also means you gotta bring your tools, your lunch, all that stuff in with you. Now, Milwaukee, a couple of these other companies have made really great rolling toolboxes now where you can put everything in there, get it out of the back of your truck, and bring it in like a dolly. It's great. In my day, you were carrying your Playmate cooler and you had your tool bag over your shoulder, and that walk could be a real pain in the neck. The job that we're working on right now, the parking lot is maybe a half mile away from the job, and then you're gonna have to walk that. In August or in January or raining or snowing, any of those things in between. That's how you're starting your day. And don't forget, you don't park at the start of the job. You have to be on site. So reverse that whole, walk And that's the time that you have to park where you have to park in order to walk and get onto the job site and be where you are for your orders for the day. Are you aware of PTO or paid time off? Some locals that I know of don't give you anything at all. You don't have vacation, you don't have sick days, you just have days that you work and days that you don't. Which doesn't mean that you have to come in. Nobody's gonna force you at gunpoint to go to work. My wife, her company, she has 30 days PTO right now. She can take off a whole month. My God, something like that just does not exist in my world. And when it comes to working, sometimes the pressure for overtime can be a bit much. Now, when you're an apprentice and you're not making a whole lot, scoop up all the overtime you could. If you're a young person, not a whole lot of responsibilities, bring the overtime on. I'll keep working. Time and a half? Oh my God, take it. But when you get a little older or you have responsibilities, children, things that you want to be home for, well, sometimes there can be a lot of pressure to work, more than once I've gotten a text or a call from my boss saying, hey, mandatory, tomorrow we are working 6/10s because the job's behind. We got to catch up. You're working 6/10s. You're working Saturday. You're working 10 hours a day. You got to do it. And yeah, you're making a lot of money. That's great. But what about when that happens inevitably in the nicest time of the year and you're useless on Sunday because you worked those 6/10s and now you're just shot? That certainly happens. And do you want to be the guy on your crew or the girl on your crew who says, no, I'm doing 8s? Woo. I mean, you'll be seen as the one who kind of let everybody down. There's a lot of pressure to work overtime. Now, there are some more abstract disadvantages I want to touch on real quick because I think these are important too, and I've spoken at length about this before. The stigma of the dirty, rotten construction worker. And it's there. It's definitely there. People will have their stories. I did a video a long time ago about construction workers are trash, all about this particular subject. A lot of people shared their knowledge in the comment section below that video, so I urge you to go and check those out if you want. No matter what people will tell you, because, there's a shortage, people are retiring, and a lot of people aren't joining the workforce, there still is a major stigma against construction workers, seeing us as, lowlifes, dirty, rotten people who are the dregs of society. And I gotta tell you, sometimes it's earned. When you go into that porta potty, you see what people do to it. The graffiti, the way. Sometimes, I gotta tell you, I get it. I understand why that is there. And I don't know how to fix it, but it is a problem. I remember seeing the movie Office Space, and if you don't remember that movie, great movie, first of all, but there was a scene in that where he goes in, he's like,
wanna go to Chotchki's? Get some coffee?
And like 3 of them take off, and they go to Chili's, and they get some like appetizers or coffee or something like that, right? And I remember thinking, they can just leave? What? I mean, now I'm not sure that that's every office job out there. I doubt it. I'm sure they want you at your desk and not to just leave whenever you feel like it. But there is no freedom. If you did want to go to a restaurant to sit down and eat, or you didn't get something, or you want to go get coffee, just that situation in Office Space was so alien to me that I had never seen anything like it. And when I hear people talk about their jobs where they don't work in construction and they say, oh yeah, no, we went here for lunch. Have you ever been there? It's great. Oh, we went there for lunch. Do you want to get lunch tomorrow? I had to run to the mall at lunch. That is just so outside of my understanding that it's embarrassing. There is no freedom, typically, on these big jobs. Here's a big one that I saw recently on a Reddit post where the guy had gotten into the trades and just couldn't swing it. You're working next to a lot of people who are pretty rough. You're working next to ex-cons, you're working next to people who simply had no other option but to work a blue-collar job because the mind wasn't working that well, but the back was sturdy, so that's what they got to do, right? And that's okay. But these people typically will sort of perpetuate the macho mindset. And that is just the, come on, you got it, pick that thing up. I can't tell you how many times we would grab rolls of wire, master reels of wire and bring those things up the stairs. It was not the easiest way to do it. And I certainly felt it in my back, especially now. I'm paying for the stupid crap that I did as a young man now in my 40s, which sucks. But, that's one of the things that happens. There is certainly a mindset out there of, come on, get it done, and being treated as such, I'm sure doesn't help matters at all. But if you're used to a certain, like I was when I talked to that painter, when you're not used to people busting your stones, when you're not used to the mentality of a job site, it could be jarring. And if you don't come from that world, you may think, man, I just don't fit in here. And who do you talk to if you do have a problem on the job? Usually there's no HR department. Now, a lot of these bigger sites, there's a zero tolerance policy for bullying and all that kind of stuff, which, as I mentioned before, can be part of the camaraderie. It's a very delicate balance. But if you have a problem, usually you're talking to your supervisor or you're working it out person to person, right? That's it. You guys are just dealing with it. You're gonna have to work with that guy, so just get over it. It's gonna be fine. I mean, but I hear about the things that go on in offices and I'm like, what? Man, I wish that was our worry out on the construction site, because it can be pretty difficult. And so you end up solving your problems with people who are sometimes unreasonable the best way you can.
Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mundus.
The last one I'm gonna leave you with is the body breaks down before your mind. This is usually a young man's game. A young person's game. I'm sorry, I have to be much more inclusive. There are plenty of awesome women out on the job site who kick ass. And, it's a young person's game. Your body will break down, as I described earlier. I mean, we were bringing rolls of wire up when we could use the lift. There's no problem with doing that, but you want to show how tough you are. And your body will only last for so long. So all of that earning potential, let's say you're making six figures, you're doing well, you can deal with the job. But after a little while, you simply can't perform your job anymore. Your body starts to break down, your back goes, your grip, whatever it is. The substance abuse in construction is terrible. Just painkillers alone. And so it can be a problem, especially as you want to have a longer career. What happens when you get to be 50 years old? 60 years old, and you're expected to keep doing the job that you were doing? The mind is still sharp, the body starts to break down. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll move into a supervisory position, maybe even into office position. They start to get out of the field and start directing other people because they get the benefit of the knowledge that they had. But what if you're one of those people who I mentioned before who simply doesn't have that kind of skill, doesn't have the refinement to work or the brains to work in a supervisory position? You're just gonna be out there, and boy, I hope your back holds out. That is a pretty scary prospect. You work for your whole life developing this skill, which you simply cannot physically perform anymore. Arthritis, all that stuff can really, it screws you up. And then what are you gonna do? You're done. So those are some of the disadvantages. Overall, I think that the trades can be a good thing for the right person, especially in the right location. But you have to check all these things out. And for people to paint the whole thing with a broad brush and say, yeah, no, go to trade school. It's like that whole thing, learn to code. You can't do that. It's all about the person. Do they fit the trades mentality? Is their location, does it pay well? Are jobs plentiful? Is there, a union there? Is there not? Is there work? There's a lot of things to consider, but nobody ever seems to talk about those disadvantages, and I wanted to make this long-winded video, I am sorry, to talk about some of those disadvantages so that you don't get blindsided. And hopefully you see this and then you say, you know what? That sounds fine to me. I'm gonna pursue with my career, and good on you. If you don't, well, it's good that you know now. Anyway, I hope this video was useful to you. If you want to see more stuff about workwear and stuff like that, I have done a whole bunch of videos. I put them in a playlist for you. So choosing your first work boots, or even if you're like me and you went years and years and years wearing the same work boots and then actually discovered great work boots and the difference that they can make, that video's in there as well. And I hope you check that out. If not, this is the last time I speak to you. Good luck out there, and do your research before you make the leap into a trade.